Okay, so this is part 3, I think, of suspension change, whatever I decide to call these videos. Now, what we need to work on next is the steering. Now, I just finished tacking this into place. This is a new steering column. It's a little hard to show the camera because it's kind of buried in there. But we will have to figure out a way to attach the new steering column to the original steering column. I am going to be using one of these from Go Power Sports. We'll do that later. Right now, what we need to work on is installing the tie rods. Now, this is going to be the hardest part because there's a lot of stuff in the way, and we need to make sure that the tie rods that the suspension can move all the way up and down, and that the tires can turn back and forth without the tie rods binding up on anything or hitting anything or this thing having any bump steer. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach, this is like a mock-up tie rod. I'm not really sure how long these things need to be yet. So I'm going to attach one side to the new steering column. I'm going to attach the other side to a random place on the spindle and then just move the suspension up and down, see if there's any bump steer, and just basically adjust until it has no bump steer while the suspension moves up and down and when the tires are turned all the way left and right. So basically just a lot of, tacking into place, testing it, moving it a little bit, adjusting, bunch of that stuff. So hopefully I can get this to work. Yep, so I had a feeling the steering on this thing was going to be a nightmare, and it is. It's definitely being a challenge. So right now, the issues we're having is the tie rods are hitting the frame right here, and I have to put, I can't really do anything about that unless I put a bend in the tie rods, which I already have to do for this side because they're off by a lot, and I can't put the mount angled in, because then they would operate. So what I'm basically having to do is on this tie rod on this side, I have to put 2 bends in the tie rod, which is not ideal. You're really not supposed to do that, but as long as you make it strong enough, it shouldn't be an issue. And then on that side, I only have to put 1 bend in it just to get this to work. So also the other issue we're having is the tie rod, the Heim joints I'm using. These are 3/8 Heim joints. They don't have that much articulation in this direction, and they're binding up right about here, and we still have another inch of travel left on the suspension. So the only way to work around that is we need to use high misalignment spacers, which I don't think they make them for this small. And even if they did, I wouldn't want to use it because this is a 3/8, and the high misalignment spacer would probably go to a 1/4 of an inch bolt. I don't want to do that for this steering on this thing, so only option is just go to a bigger Heim joint. I do have these are 1/2-inch Heim joints, a little too big for the steering on this thing. I did look into trying to find 7/16 Heim joints. I found them on eBay, and they ship in like a day, but I couldn't find high misalignment spacers for 7/16. So we can't do that. So we're just gonna have to use these. These are a little too big, but should be fine. Bigger and stronger is better, I guess. So I did order new high misalignment spacers for these Heim joints. They get here in a couple days, but I don't feel like waiting a couple days. And I do have the same high misalignment spacers on the steering on the CBR 1000 project, so we're gonna borrow them from that, use them for this, and then once the new ones get here, we'll put them back on the CBR 1000 project just so we can continue working on this thing. Alright, got the tie rods installed. They do kind of hit the frame a little bit, but this is actually not the bottom of the travel. These ropes keep stretching on me. But if you measure it, the bottom of the travel is more like right here, and it doesn't really hit the frame. It does hit the frame a little bit, but it's like at max turning radius that this thing can probably do. So I'd say it's fine. The steering works fine. Now, truth be told, this does have just a little bit of bump steer, which is unfortunate. It is not perfect, but it's the best I can do because of just how this is set up. And this is, I had a feeling when trying to figure out how to design this, this is why I was so kind of cautious about doing this, pondering, should I do this? Because I had a feeling that I couldn't get rid of all the bump steer on this thing. And if I line this thing up right there and move the suspension all the way up and down, you can see that it does move a little bit. A little bit. It's the worst, like right here and here, which is at the very top of the travel, where the suspension's probably going to be traveling the most while we're driving this thing is probably between like here and here, and it doesn't really move that much. It does move. You can kind of see it does like the swooping thing between here and here, but it's not that bad. I don't think. I hope not. So hopefully you're not going to notice it. It is not perfect. It is unfortunate, but it's the best I can do with this setup because I had to put the steering columns through here. I'm limited with how I can do this. It's the best I can do, unfortunately, with this setup. So I'd say let's move on. Let's start working on attaching this steering column right here to the original steering column. Alright, the suspension seems like perfect right now. It's not too soft and it's not too hard. The steering works amazing. It's super easy to steer this thing now. And it also has a decent amount of Ackerman angle. That tire turns more than that tire, while in this direction, and same thing on this, in this direction. So now, next thing we need to do is we need to weld everything together. Most of this stuff is simply just tacked into place. Some of it is fully welded, like the top A-arms, but most of this is simply just tacked into place. Now, as much as I don't want to do this, it is going to be a lot easier to weld everything together without the engine in the frame. It is going to be a lot harder to... It is going to make a lot more work to take the engine out just to weld everything together. It's going to make a mess, make a mess on removing the coolant lines, removing the fuel lines, unhooking all this wiring. But I feel like to do this properly, to weld this thing out properly, we do need to remove this engine out of the frame. So hopefully it's not going to create that much extra work. Alright, so we finished welding this thing together last night. Now, I do know that I did say that I was only going to take the engine out and then proceeded to completely disassemble this entire thing. I got a little carried away with disassembling this thing, but I guess it's good because I was able to turn it over and get it some of the harder places to weld. This also gives me a chance to look over everything and make sure nothing else is bending or breaking and make sure no other welds are cracking on this frame. Now, before we do anything else, I want to take this thing outside and pressure wash this thing off because it's still really dirty, and I'm also going to take the tires outside, pressure wash those, as well as some of this other stuff that's just got a bunch of dirt on it. Alright, so now the next couple steps is we need to start reassembling this thing, but I am going to save that for the next video of this project because while this thing is already disassembled, I kind of want to check everything. There's a couple things I want to check just to make sure they're not about to break. Maybe replace the bearings in the rear axle. They do sound a little crunchy. Yeah, just a little bit. So maybe replacing them wouldn't be the worst idea ever. Also, really want to check the jack shaft because I remember when we had that issue with the jack shaft where it drilled itself in the battery and had to take it apart. When I took it apart, the two keys on the jack shaft were starting to shear in half from the horsepower of this engine, and that was kind of a while ago. And we put a lot of miles on this thing since, and I want to take it apart again and check the keys and make sure they're not about to snap in half. And also probably replace the bearings in that as well as replace the axle on that. And I definitely, while this thing is disassembled, I'm probably going to touch up the paint on the frame as well as everything else. Also definitely paint the new stuff we welded on, as well as paint the new A-arms and all that kind of stuff. Kind of give this thing a new fresh coat of paint because this stuff's kind of chipping and starting to rust here and there. Normally I like to wait to fully test something for painting and finalizing something, but because this thing is already disassembled, I'm just going to hope that we don't have any issues with the new front A-arms, and I'm going to paint them and hope that they work flawlessly the first time. Because I don't want to reassemble this thing, take it for a test drive, find out that they work, and then have to take it apart again just to paint all this new stuff. So that means I gotta end this video here, and the next video of this project is going to hopefully be painting, reassembly, and finalizing this thing, and also maybe test the new suspension somehow. So It's kind of funny that all this started with I just wanted to fix what was broken 3 months ago, and it kind of turned into an idea of maybe possibly rebuilding the front suspension to A-arms, and the next thing I know, this thing is completely disassembled, and I'm giving this thing a new paint job. Anyway, I gotta end this video here. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.